Now, if I had a 5K and a 10K and I was doing a challenge where if someone wanted to sign up for both of those events and see how well they did in both together,
Hmm.
how would I set that up in RaceDay Scoring?
Sure. So this is a fairly complicated setup, but it is possible. What you would want to do first is make sure that you're using super sub events on RunSignup. So this event grouping here is what you'd want to enable. Now in this case, let's say that the RRCA 5K is actually a challenge event or a bundle event, and then those participants will show up in the 5K and the 10K. So what you do here is just check that 10K run and save. And now participants who register for that event are going to show up in those sub-events in RaceDay Scoring. So now that happens, what you'll have to do in RaceDay Scoring is set up scored events for each of these categories. So let me just go back here and save, make sure I get my settings update from RunSignup. Okay, so now I am back in RaceDay Scoring, and I can see in my super sub event grouping that the 5K includes participants in the RCA 5K, and the 10K also includes those participants. So this is looking good. So one thing you have to consider here is that because it's a super and sub event setup on RunSignup, it's one registration that's going to be in multiple events. There's a restriction here because one registration can't have multiple different bib numbers, right? You only get one bib number. So with these kind of situations, you have to have or be all right with giving out one bib number, and the person wears that bib in both the 5K and the 10K. So what would happen in RaceDay Scoring is you'd actually set up all of these events individually. So I'm going to do a quick setup, and I've got my 5K, I got my 10K, and then my bundle, I'm going to call it challenge here, it's going to be a 15K total, right? 5K plus 10K. Now, the way that you'd have to do it, you'd have to basically say, you'd have to set up timing locations for each event you have. So you'd have 5K start finish and a 10K start finish. And then you would basically say the 5K is going to be the timing location, basically 5K start finish from the start time to the finish time in that location. And then the 10K will be the 10K location start to finish. And the bundle is going to be 5K start to 10K finish. And then you'd set up segments. So segments are basically like times that are generated for a race. The entire race segment is there by default. It's the start to the finish that you set up in your scored event. Now, if you had a split, you could add a segment, and then you got your split point. And you can define, this is a chip start by saying it starts at, the start location and it finishes at the finish location. If I had a split point, it'd make more sense here. But you could add any number of these split points. So if this were a race where I had like a 5K and a 10K that were getting combined, what you'd probably see is instead of a separate start finish like this, usually you'd see something more like this. A 5K start finish, that is a start and finish location. And I would set up when would I want to consider my start times until. If it's a 9 a.m. start, I might say it takes 2 minutes for people to get through the start line. After that, I don't want to consider that to be a start. And then I want to start considering finish times around, let's say, 9:14. I don't think anyone too speedy is coming in today. And then I have to say what my gap factor is going to be. This is basically what's the minimum time in between two reads on that location. So I'm going to say, again, 14 minutes. So this is going to be my 5K start finish. And I will also set up an additional bib and time filter here, because these are just saying I want to consider my start times until sometime and all the finish times after sometime. But if the 10K is later in the day, there's going to be a problem because the system won't be able to figure out, was this an early 10K start read for bib 512, or was it a late 5K finish for that same person? So what you have to do is set up an additional filter for this one to say, for the 5K, I only want to consider times altogether between 9:02 a.m. And let's say I expect the final finish around 12 p.m. And so that's going to limit my range of times available for the 5K to this. So now I've got my 5K start finish set up, and I'm going to do a similar thing for the 10K. Now in this case, let's say my 10K is starting around 12:30 p.m. or 1 p.m., let's say. So I'm going to say at 1:02 would be my final start for the 10K. And my first finish is going to be, let's say, no earlier than 1:30. And my gap factor, meaning the fastest time between reads, is going to be 28 minutes. So now in both of these cases, they're called locations, but I'm actually going to use the same reader data and send it to both of those locations. The reason I need to do that is because the 5K and the 10K are happening at different times. So I missed a setup here. I forgot I need to set up the additional filters as well for the 10K. I'm going to add that range. I'm going to say I want to accept reads between 1:02 and, let's say 5 p.m. So I can limit that time frame. Okay, so now I've got my two locations set up here, and I'm actually going to say that I'm going to use the same stream for both of those locations. So that means that basically I've got one reader out there, but it's sending data to these different locations, and all of the times are being filtered for each event differently. So I've got my one stream right here that I'm actually going to use for both of my locations. So it was already set up for the 10K. I'm also going to set it up for the 5K. And so now I've got one stream of data that's sending to two different locations. And those locations I'm going to use for my scored events. So the 5K will start at the 5K, start finish, and it will finish at the start finish. It is going to finish on the second occurrence, meaning the first occurrence will be their start time, their chip start time, and the second occurrence will be their finish time. So they go across the mats and they hit the mats again. That's their 5K finish. For the 10K, I'm going to say use that 10K location that I set up with all of those time filters applied. So the first time they hit after before 1:02 p.m., but use that as their chip start time for their 10K, and their first read after 1:30 or whatever I had it set up for is going to be their finish time for the 10K. And so you need to do this because it's going to be the same bib number. So the system needs to figure out, okay, the same person is participating in both of these races. So I know the 5K is going to be between this time and that time, and the 10K is between this time and that time. So it'll be able to determine based on the time of day of the read what attribution it should be in terms of the events. So now I've got these two set up, and the bundle, the challenge, is going to be from the 5K start finish to the 10K start finish. So that's going to be the entire time it takes for them to go from the 5K start to the 10K finish. Now obviously there's a problem there because you've got all that time in between races. So what you can do is you can set up segments in the bundle event to say that, hey, the total time is going to be from the 5K to the 10K, but I need to get rid of all the time in between races. So what you could do is set up a rest segment, which is going to be the time between races. You can even call it time between races. And I'm going to check this box rest segment. What this is going to do, it will remove the time spent in this segment from the total time for this race. So basically it's going to say, hey, the time that is spent getting from the 5K second occurrence to the 10K first occurrence should be subtracted from their total. So any downtime is going to be removed. So this is what you would do to set up that bundle. This challenge is now going to be scored as just the 5K time plus the 10K time. So this is how you would do it. Now, if you wanted to, you could also add more segments in here. If you wanted to show in one report their total time, their 5K time, and their 10K time, you would just set up a 5K segment here from start finish, just like your scored event. And my segment distance is 5 kilometers, and my cumulative distance is also 5 kilometers, meaning when I finish this segment, I'm 5 kilometers through the race in total. So I've added my 5K, and then I'm going to add a 10K as well. So this one, again, I'm going to start at the 10K, and I'm going to finish at 10K, second occurrence. Now, in this case, the segment distance is 10 kilometers, but the cumulative distance is 15. That means, like, when I finish this segment, I have done in total 15 kilometers. But the segment itself is only 10. So now I've got all of these set up, and I can reorder them if I wanted to. But this is the basic idea, right? I've got my total time, I got my 5K split, the time in between races, and the 10K. So I have set this up as a rest segment, but I might also want to use this setting to hide it from report columns, because you probably don't care to see how long it took you to sit down in between races. So in this case, I'm going to say I don't want that in there. So if I go to reports now, I'm not going to be able to see much, but I can preview my report by going into filtering and sorts, and I'm going to show non-starters and participants without a bib number just to get an idea of what it's going to look like. Okay, so I got no participants in this race yet, but if I had some participants that were actually in this event, I would see the 5K split times, the 10K split times, and the totals over here. So this will show everything. You may want to customize what split data shows. It does show a lot of data by default, so you can customize that in your report. Going to edit columns, edit your splits column, and this will allow you to say, I don't care about pace cumulative, or I don't care about time cumulative, I only care about the segment times. Usually, I would say in this case, I'd probably just hide all cumulative columns because it isn't as useful for this situation. Cumulative times are nice to show for like a marathon where you want to see what was their 5K time, what was their half marathon time, what was their 20K time, and what was their finish time. You don't want to show what was the time that it took between the 5K split and the half marathon split. So, but in this case, I do want to show those individual segments, so I'm going to hide the cumulative data. So now this will be a little bit cleaner report. It'll just show here, my 5K time, my pace for the 5K, my 10K time, my pace for the 10K, and my total. So let's say I wanted to take a look at what this is going to do when I actually have some data come through. So I don't have a reader set up, but I can add times manually. And this is a really critical thing to learn how to do. So let's just give it a shot. So I've got bib 123 registered for my RRCA 5K. So I'm going to come into my raw reads area. If I were actually connected to a system, I'd have some data showing up here, but I'm just going to manually do this. For testing purposes, it's highly recommended that you play around when you are working on a setup that you're not sure about. It's your first time doing anything like this. So let's go ahead and add some fake data here. So before I do that, I'm just going to take a look. Down here, I've got some notes about my time filters. So the 5K is considering times until 9:02 and then after 9:14. So I'm going to probably add a time. Well, first I should actually set my start times for these. I don't have any. Well, I had some, but they're not really accurate. Let's go into my scored events and actually set my start times. So I said that the 5K was going to start at 9 a.m. So let's just say it started right on time. And the 10K started at 1 p.m. And the bundle, or the challenge, was also at 9 a.m. Okay, so now that I have my start time set up, I can start adding some reads. So it's going to say, okay, I expect some times after 9 a.m., but before 9:02, and those are probably going to be their chip start times. And then I'm looking again for another read for each person after 9:14. So let's go and to raw reads, and I'm going to add some raw reads. I'm going to do it for the 5K. Bib 1, 2, 3. I'm going to say they started 09:01, and then they finished at 09:20. So I click Submit Reads, and it will just put all of these read data in here because we have one stream that's being used at a bunch of different locations. So it's actually going to create 4 different reads for me because it's valid for 4 different occurrences here. The 5K start, 5K finish, 10K start, and 10K finish. But only one is actually used here. So this instance is actually the one that's going to be used, and it's used at the 5K start finish. And the other one's actually being ignored right now. So let's see what's going on here. It says, this is the one that I would expect to be used. It's saying that a timing location time filter is the reason why it's not being used. So I must have set something up wrong. So let's take a look at our timing location time filters to make sure we didn't configure something wrong. So I'm going to go back here, go to settings, and I'm going to go to additional bib and time filters. Yeah, see, this is my problem. I set this up to be starting at 9:02, but I really want to set it up to start at 9 when the actual race goes off. So now if I save this and go back, yeah, now it gets selected because it's available, that 9:01 is valid in that range. So I got this read selected as their start, this read selected as their finish. So I should see that this person now has, a 20-minute clock time. So if I go in, I can see in the 5K, they got a 20-minute clock time and a 19-minute chip time. And if I go into the challenge, I can see the same thing. They got a 19-minute, that's their chip time. So this will always be chip time for this kind of report, for this combo event, and that's usually fine for people. So, okay, they've done their 5K, and they're all good. So now let's go ahead and set up add sometimes the 10K. I got a feeling I messed up the 10K too for my timing locations here. So let's take a look. This is why we test. Yep, the same problem here. I set it up as 1:02, but it really should be 1. Okay, so now let's go in and see what my filters are. I'm accepting reads until 1:02 and after 1:30. So let's go into raw reads, and I'm going to do a similar thing here, selecting the 10K, bib 1, 2, 3. I'm going to record a time for this person at 1:01 for their start. And I'm going to record a time at, let's say, 1:50 p.m. That'll be their finish. All right, looks good. So I got my start read selected and my finish read selected here. So now what I should see is not only do they have a 5K, they also got a 50-minute 10K. Looks good. If I go down to reports now, I can check out the challenge, and I can see here it's 1:09. So that is going to be the total, or sorry, well, yeah, the chip time will be what I really want to look at here, 1:08. That's going to be 49 plus 19. So that's exactly what we want. We want the 5K plus 10K.